What's up, y'all? It's Ty. We're back with another Offensive Legends video. This one being Allen Iverson. Now, AI, I think, changed the game. Not more than anybody, but quite a bit in his prime. And I'm excited to dive into early 2000s AI.
Allen Iverson is one of his
Shout out to Thicky Basketball, the GOAT.
most polarizing players. Some consider him one of the best ever. Others think his style of play was selfish and inefficient.
He was inefficient.
So, where's the truth? Would he have been more successful playing a different way? Do modern stats really paint him in a negative light? Or do they struggle to capture the value of one of the more complex offensive players in NBA history?
You are watching what
Make up the legend.
AI was in his prime was fun though. There's no debate. There's no debating that.
Who's on your short list of best competitors you faced?
Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson are the two that come to mind.
It's crazy. AI right up there with MJ. It's crazy.
From opening tip to the end, I mean, this guy was just going and going and going, and he'd always put you in jeopardy. So those two guys are the most competitive I faced.
For most of NBA history, the very best players have all been tall. Bob Cousy won the 1957 MVP at 6'1", and then the next 43 MVPs went to players who were 6'5" or taller.
That is kind of crazy. The guards were
Allen
just
Iverson.
undersized, and he's 6 feet.
AI was listed at 6 feet, although he's probably closer to 5'11" barefoot, but he overcame a lack of size with quickness, ball handling, and ingenuity. Before Iverson, dribbling wizards kept the ball closer to their body, and the best crossover dribbles were often short and quick, snapping the ball from one hand to the other to throw off a defense.
That was smooth right there.
But
oh my
Allen's
gosh,
crossover was longer and wider, hesitating and bringing the ball away from his body before scraping it across the court to blow by his man. This was occasionally called a carrying violation when Iverson entered the league, because of that cupping or scooping in the air that radically changed the direction of the ball.
That is not a carry.
But within a few seasons, pausing and cupping the dribble was viewed as legal, so AI broke his share of ankles with this innovative crossover. His ball handling paired perfectly with his quickness and balance, stopping on a dime like he was hit with a freeze ray. Ty Lue keeps going, and Iverson ends up with free throws. Woo! This is ridiculous Formula One braking to spin away for a clutch bucket in
AI just had that it factor.
his playoff game. And I don't fully understand the physics here, but his back knee nearly scrapes the floor as he pirouettes in the other direction before that beautiful kiss off the glass.
Such great touch.
With his package of crossovers, hesitations, and sheer agility, staying in front of Iverson was like trying to hold water in the palm of your hand. And he had this unparalleled knack for slithering into tight spaces, hopping between two defenders whose feet are touching, only to explode vertically and finish over Shaq.
Come on, man. This defies physics.
For someone pushing 6 feet tall, AI had some hops when he was younger. For someone pushing 6 feet
This looks like Mike.
tall, AI had some hops when he was younger, and he didn't really play above the rim, but that bounce helped him find some very creative finishes among the trees.
What?
He had all kinds of little flip shots and reverse layups around the basket, and these kinds of finishes are usually reserved for 6'6" wings.
Nah, he's
instead
special,
of
man.
undersized.
I do not care what he shot.
guards.
This man is
But
special.
He had the chutzpah to just hurl himself toward defenders and the English to spin home some shots that had almost no business going in. I mean, he shoots this thing under the defender's arms like it's one of those mind-bending trick shots in pool. If we look at rim attempts from the early 2000s, Stephon Marbury was the only other guard to regularly shoot at the basket more frequently than Iverson. And
About
in
the same
2001,
percentages,
AI used that crafty touch to shoot an impressive 64% at the hoop. He also used his quickness to draw a ton of fouls on drives, ranking 4th among guards in NBA history in multi-year free throw rates, behind only James Harden, Dwayne Wade, and Michael Jordan. despite standing 4 to 6 inches shorter than them. Allen was constantly hop-stepping around traffic in the paint, and he used that technique to move laterally into soft pockets in the defense.
Wait,
he
what?
beats his man, then heads right into this space in the
Does this get poked away, or is this a
lane
pass?
to set up a nice little no-look assist.
Oh my gosh, that's a pass.
Then
That's
on the very next
fantastic.
play, LA is forcing him baseline, so he works back to the middle just to cross over and then hop step through a little crease in the lane. Watch
That's
how
a
he
travel
probes the
nowadays,
defense
is it
here,
not?
keeping his dribble alive even with extra bodies thrown at him, only to find a little soft spot to shoot from. And the hop step in particular let him attack in traffic while protecting the ball. He picks it up to hop right through defenders into a little space for a
That's a
tough
travel
mid-range
nowadays. You can't like hop off one foot and come down on that one foot. Don't call it nowadays. but
here.
I'm not gonna
And
hate on
he
it.
took a lot of shots like this
They
in
call
the
it back then,
short
so.
mid-range. He had a little floater or leaning jump shot from this range where he'd pick it up early to avoid shot blockers and just lob it over them
He's
instead.
just so quick.
So defenders were desperately trying to stay in front of him, and then he just hit him with a pull-up from the mid-range. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about Iverson is how, despite his diminutive stature, he created just enough space to shoot from all over the court. The ball handling, quickness, deceleration, and high release opened up a world of mid-range shots, and many of these were not easy. He
None
could
of
make
them are
them going
easy.
in just about any direction, leaning or off balance, but either way he lived off a diet of
such good
difficult
touch, though.
shots from all over the court. Naturally, he had a little step back jumper too. There was no gather step back then, so this was often a small hop, but it was his way of moving backwards to create the space needed to shoot. And even at his height, that was enough space to pop threes over smaller defenders because they were always on
That
their
is a ridiculous shot right there.
heels trying to take away his penetration, giving him room to rise and fire. That meant he could use the classic triple threat position and jab step at opponents to move them before dribbling to set up a shot. And on this one,
These shots are crazy.
he catches it on the move just to rock Kobe Bryant with that step and open airspace to launch. Despite his legendary ball handling, Iverson played quite a bit away from the ball in Philadelphia under our old friend Larry Brown. Brown actually jumped from Indiana to Philly in 1998, and he brought similar off-ball actions for Iverson that we saw for Reggie Miller in the last episode. He could start down on the baseline and work off a bunch of screens for a jumper up top. He could counter off those screens and use his speed to create space on the other side of the court. And he really loved to sprint horizontally from one wing to the other to create a little separation and then go to work. It could be awkward for defenders to go
Iverson cut.
under this foul line screen,
what
so when they
call it
chased him
now.
over the top, he would find a little shooting pocket. So when he'd run across the face of the court on that patented cut, he could shoot or attack the space and break down the defense, and that leads to good offense for Philadelphia here. This time he's being chased into the corner and then uses that defender's momentum against him to hop into traffic and find an open dunk. In that sense, Iverson, especially during the Larry Brown years, was really a hybrid of an off-ball and on-ball player. But
Just
even
so imagine trying to guard him. He's so quick.
though he ran around like some of the best movement shooters of that era and splashed a ton of outside shots, there was something very different about AI that made this offensive approach so polarizing.
I think for a guy his size, he was the most intimidating player. Because that was the thing that made him so tough. Because some guys you would play against, and Rick, they're going to take 16, 18 shots a game. Iverson go out there and take 35, 40 shots.
From 1999
That's
to
just crazy.
2006,
35,
no one in
40.
the NBA scored more points than Allen Iverson. No one took more shots either. Take this game against the Lakers from 2005, where Iverson was his usual unwavering self, pressuring LA from the jump with his dribble drive game, working off the ball when needed just to hop step through the paint, and using that crossover and athleticism to get to his sweet spots. Only as he kept shooting, he did just to hop step through the
Look
paint.
Look at Kyle Korver on this,
and using
next
that
possession.
crossover
His hands
and
are up. He's like, can you pass me the ball, please?
To his sweet spot.
Imagine not throwing it to Kyle Korver.
Only as he kept shooting these, he kept missing. And fittingly, that didn't dissuade him in the slightest, clanking a tough mid-ranger, only to try an open three from the corner. And since that didn't work, he just took it to the backer,
Kyle Korver always
only to
has
try
his
an
hands
open
up.
three from the corner. And since that didn't
How
work,
do we tell Kyle Korver
he
he's not
took it
getting
to
the
the
ball?
basket, but was easily dismissed. By the end of the third, AI was a chilly 2 for 20 from the floor, and while every player has bad shooting nights, these were more common for Iverson
2 for
than
20
most high-volume scorers historically. If we account for threes and free throws by looking at true shooting percentage, Iverson had a ton of cold shooting games. In his 57 playoff contests from 99 to 03, he shot under 45% in true shooting a whopping 25 times.
That's really
For
poor.
comparison, Reggie Miller was under 45% just 5 times
So I was going to say, Reggie Miller was so efficient in our last
during the
episode.
entire 1990s. So, if Iverson took plenty of threes and drew so many fouls, why wasn't he more efficient? Well, we've already seen one reason.
He just shoots tough shots.
He takes really tough shots. This is a double-edged sword because these are the very shots that terrorize defenders and lead to 50-point scoring outbursts, but this is still a crossover into a leaning 20-footer with a hand in his face. Tough shot maker
I just can't believe he shoots
are
those.
kind of cursed in this sense, almost like the scientists in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Another factor you may have noticed is just how many of his jumpers were long twos, another difficult shot with lower returns than a 3 or something closer. And did you catch his form on that one? He doesn't snap his wrist and basically stops his follow-through. And this was something he did quite often, trying to just gently touch it in on this difficult twisting pull-up. Broadcasters would occasionally talk about the inconsistencies or backwards lean in his jumper, and I think this was related to his form, where he'd whip the ball over his head before leaving the ground, then power it to the rim in the air.
That's
and
actually
this
nuts.
takes a ton of strength, so naturally his legs kicked out underneath him to compensate. Here you can see he's off the ground and then starts moving the ball to the basket, but never straightens the arm on the follow-through. Yet later in the same game when he's wide open, it's a more fluid motion and the follow-through is straight.
I mean, I feel like when you take tough shots, though, sometimes your form does, it's going
Iverson
to be
also
maybe
took a
inconsistent.
ton of long shots. About 40% of his overall scoring attempts came from at least 15 feet away, but his best 2-year stretch landed him in just the 30th percentile historically.
That's
That's
not good at all.
10% worse than a sharpshooter like Allen Houston on a similar number of long twos.
But again,
and
AIs
threes.
are way tougher. But
Some of these shots that he missed were great looks, some were really difficult, and some were just trigger-happy jumpers before looking for something better. Here's one where he tries to catch the defense off guard, ends up with a contested drifting shot, but that at least drew 2 defenders and opened
that's
up
what
a
I'm
team.
saying. Like, their game plan was just to have AI shoot these tough shots, and you have offensive
Make for the
rebounders.
rebound and a putback. So one benefit to AI's shooting aggression was that teams reacted to it, freeing up his teammates. When he drives by his man on this play, multiple defenders converge on his hop step, which leaves a shooter wide
I was
open
gonna say, did he actually pass?
for an almost 3. All of his agility and ball handling that knifed through defenses opened up good shots for teammates too. So Allen was a volume scorer and a volume playmaker, hitting the 99th percentile historically in estimated shots created for teammates.
He has the ball in his hands at
All
all
of Iverson's
times.
heavy lifting carried the Sixers to above average playoff offenses, falling in the 60th percentile historically relative to the defenses they faced, which was actually better than their defensive performances by this same measure, which is kind of remarkable for a team that mainly surrounded AI
They had Dikembe
with a ton of defensive talent.
Maybe AI was horrible defensively.
The occasional possessions where Iverson just idled away from the action were quite bumpy because Aaron McKee was their only other decent creator, and many of their good defenders like Tyrone Hill, Dikembe Mutombo, and Eric Snow were fairly limited when asked to pressure defenses themselves. As the 2001 playoffs unfolded, defenses started loading up on him to get the ball out of his hands. And sometimes this meant sliding an extra defender into his driving lane to stop.
I feel like in the playoffs, teams do this a ton even now. Like, just load up.
That's
what they do.
Force a weaker teammate to beat them instead. But it also meant outright double teaming him on the perimeter and then scrambling and recovering behind the play, even with his outside shooting issues. That poor shooting Laker game is a perfect example. Despite all the misses, Iverson carved up Los Angeles for his teammates.
And that's the thing, like, if you shoot and make tough shots, it puts so much pressure on the defense.
Shot after
it
shot
really does.
All night long. This version of AI played more on ball than the early 2000s, which meant more pick and roll game and touching the paint with the intent to set up better shots. I think he was a little bit better as a passer.
Some of these bigs finishing wise are just
finding
horrible.
Space and not telegraphing this bullet to the corner for a great look.
Thank you. Just get Kyle Korver some looks, please.
Pick and roll reads were sharper, wrapping this perfectly around a defender for an easy dunk, whereas later in the game he had a similar setup but went to a quick pocket pass to catch everyone off guard. Allen actually played point guard until 1999, but he had more of a shoot-first mentality. So Larry Brown moved him to the two guard.
It's crazy, 6'2" guard.
Harness more of his off-ball game and scoring instincts, while at the same time sneaking another passer and defender into the starting lineup in Eric Snow. By the way, shoot first doesn't mean ball hog or an unwillingness to pass. It means he's less likely to move it to a mediocre three-point shooter than to take a contested pull-up himself. This is the pinhead that offensive engines have to dance on. Do you pass the ball for a marginal advantage, or do you take a difficult shot on your own?
But the thing is, like, even if he misses, look at the offensive rebounders there. That's one thing with Philly that, like, I'm looking at right now is every time he shoots, there's two guys in the paint.
Iverson was good enough as a distributor that he would bypass most tough mid-rangers for an open layup, but his size also...
Dude, why do they miss so many layups and dunks? I don't understand.
...limited his vision at times and curtailed some of these high-value passing spots. On a play like this, the big man sort of blocks his sight lines to a teammate under the rim before he gives it away. And I think he probably connects on more passes like this with a little more height, never really spotting the open man in transition. His best passes were probably on drives where he could...
Dude, he's got the whole defense watching
drop it
him.
off
This
around
is crazy.
The basket, because he had a good sense of drawing extra defenders and punishing the help.
They did surround him with some shooters, Korver, Bell.
Sometimes he just made solid reads. The Lakers send a double, and he skips a beautiful pass cross court that creates an advantage and ultimately free throws at the rim.
That poor big man.
During some of these playoff runs, defenses could telescope on AI because Philly surrounded him with defenders who lacked offensive punch.
Ew.
Which raises a critical question. Could Iverson and his teams have been more efficient if he was surrounded with more offensive talent?
They gave him some shooters, but...
Who's your point guard?
I'm gonna go with AI. Because he was fearless.
In 2006, AI averaged a career-best 33 points a game while carrying yet another offensively limited roster. The following year, he was
AI in his
traded
prime.
to the Denver Nuggets, finally giving him a collection of more offensively oriented teammates along with another big scorer to shoulder the load in Carmelo Anthony. Iverson was a little stiffer and a touch slower, but he was still shiftier and quicker than everyone with basically the same skill set. And of course, that open court speed was always a challenge to contain for the entire league. The Nuggets were an above average offense before trading for Iverson because they had players who could shoot or break down defenses on their own. Carmelo in particular was an interesting fit because
Prime Melo was crazy.
He ran a lot of isolation or two-man actions himself on one side of the floor while everyone else stood around and watched. This left a number of possessions where Iverson was idle on the weak side of the court, or he was relegated to spot-up shooting duty, only teams were happy to leave him and go help because they weren't really worried about his three ball. Since those teammates were more of a threat, Allen faced less defensive pressure, but that didn't really change his shot diet. In Philly, Iverson was regularly around 30 points.
I feel like AI is the type of guy, like, he needs to be that primary option. Like, he does. He's not a great catch and shoot three-point shooter. He's just
on
not.
True shooting that was slightly below league average. In Denver, his volume dropped as he did less, but his efficiency only rose a touch despite the healthier offensive environment. What's even more head-scratching is that Denver's offensive effectiveness didn't change when Andre Miller was traded for Iverson mid-season.
That's kind of crazy. Andre Miller, a great defender, a great playmaker. He's a good playmaker.
And in his two postseasons there, the Nuggets' playoff offenses were worse than Philadelphia's offenses with Iverson.
That's crazy, with all that
Then
talent.
when Denver swapped out Iverson for Chauncey Billups, the Nuggets became an elite playoff offense. So what is going on here?
That is crazy. Like, those statistics are not in Iverson's favor at all.
Carmelo's growth certainly helped in 2009, and other players always change a little from year to year, but I also think Iverson's strengths are always going to help offensively inept teams, but they won't necessarily fit with better teammates, especially those who need the ball to provide a lot of value.
Like, especially if you're not a great catch and shoot three-point shooter. That's the big thing.
Someone like Anthony drew extra defensive attention, better shooting would improve the offense. Long contested twos early in the clock are worse with better teammates because skilled offensive units will stress defenses and usually create a better shot than a covered 20-footer. And the difficult shots in a crowd become suboptimal when an open shooter is actually good.
I mean, that was a fine shot for AI. That's an easy
This is
look,
why
bro.
it's incredibly rare for good offenses to feature high-volume, inefficient scorers. Only 6 volume scorers in NBA history have been 1% below league average efficiency on an above-average offense.
That is a crazy stat. That's a crazy stat.
Because Aldridge is the only one.
But like, Russell Westbrook's a good example. Like, by himself, a really good fit. And if he can run his offense, he's a great fit. But since he's not a good shooter, it's tough. It's tough if the ball is not in his hands. Even prime Russ.
Ever do it on a top 20% regular season offense, and Carmelo's the only one to do it on a really good playoff offense. Although Dominique Wilkins just missed doing it on both a great regular season and postseason attack. Wilkins and his teams grabbed a ton of offensive rebounds and didn't turn it over much. And Iverson was a moderately low turnover player himself, especially when he was making a scoring move. And that ball security is often lost in the discussion of high volume scorers who don't have the best shooting numbers. If we included turnovers in these scoring attempts, players like Dominique and AI were probably just above league average instead of being below it. And while it's a small thing, it's a reminder that there's more to the scoring game than just shooting percentages.
It is. Plus, if you take care of the ball, it's less transition opportunities as well. So
Iverson's relentless stamina also helped him play an extraordinary 45 minutes a night in the playoffs. So he squeezed out a little extra value per game than his per possession numbers would indicate. And his endurance meant he could run around away from the ball under Larry Brown and provide value with his movement.
Off-ball value, so underrated.
It was a lesser version of
Saw it
the
with
same
Reggie Miller.
gravitational effect we saw last episode with Reggie Miller.
Yep, same
and
thing.
Buzzing around a ton like this provides another subtle playmaking boost that isn't always captured statistically.
These big men love to shoot mid-range jumpers.
This play where Orlando is so cued in on Iverson that Penny Hardaway leaves the ball handler to double him, which leaves the paint completely open to attack. AI did all this while taking a pounding, constantly racking up minor injuries and playing through aches and pains. And despite being one of the lightest players in the league, he took a beating, but just
because every time he gets hit, he's flying.
Kept on driving to the basket.
It's crazy.
From 2000 to 2002, Iverson missed 31 games, and the 76ers played at a 35-win pace with an offense that was 6 points per 100 below league average.
But that team was built for Iverson.
The fourth percentile historically.
That's crazy.
With AI, they were an average offense that played like a 51-win team.
Huge difference.
That's a big floor-raising
But who else they have to create outside of AI?
effort. And although Philly never beat a team with more than 53 wins in the playoffs, Iverson made them competitive enough to reach the finals by doing just enough damage with his tough shot making. Personally, I value impact on higher level teams more than weaker ones. But those early 2000s
I do too, but if you're making the finals,
Sixers
you can't tell me
may
it's a
have
weak team.
been perfect for Iverson's do-everything play style, where a roster of gritty defenders needed him to serve as the primary playmaker, and they even needed him to shoot when his teammates were open. And to me, this is what makes Iverson so fascinating. The same approach that dragged his teams to competitive heights might not work as well for a championship contender, and yet he was so much more than just his field goal percentage, and all of that
on that Philly team especially
makes him an offensive legend.
You look at that Philly team offensively, who they surrounded him with, like, it was a bunch of defenders. AI had to take tough shots. That was their game plan. It really was.
Support this channel.
I mean, AI was special in his prime. Absolutely special in Philly. Obviously, it's weird, though, when you do surround him with more offensive talent, how it just sometimes doesn't work out. But we see that in today's game. Let me know your thoughts on this down below in the comments, guys. Drop a like on it. Subscribe if you're new. And as always, man, I love you guys. Have a blessed day.